On this edition of Voices of Jonesboro, Arkansas Congressman Rick Crawford.
Congressman Crawford, thank you for coming in with us today. Let me first say thank you for giving us the time.
Absolutely.
I know you're a busy man, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit down and get to talk with you about some of the things that affect Arkansas in general, but Northeast Arkansas as well.
Sure.
I know one of the priorities that you're working on right now is this farm bill.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually, we're in a good situation because you actually sit on a committee, and you kind of give us a leg in, I guess, a dog in the fight for this bill. What committee is that?
It's in the Agriculture Committee in the House.
Okay.
And the House version of the Farm Bill it really did a great job. And of course, as you know, and most folks know, we had a Farm Bill field hearing here at Arkansas State University and back earlier in the year, and that was really crucial in how this Farm Bill in the House looked versus the Senate version of the Farm Bill, because our senators didn't support the Senate version of the Farm Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of our senators voted for it, and the House version cleaned up a lot of the mess that the Senate version would have created, and really did a great job in recognizing the diversity of production that exists across the country, and that's really a big issue for Mid-South producers, and particularly in our district in eastern Arkansas.
Sure. Now, what will it mean to the farm families in our area, in Arkansas, in the Mid-South, if this bill doesn't get passed?
Well, we're going to pass something. We know that right now we're facing the fiscal cliff, and we know there's a possibility that the Farm Bill will be packaged up as part of the deal to avert the fiscal cliff. I would prefer to see the Farm Bill voted on its own, to come to the floor on its own, but we may not have that luxury. It passed out of committee on a good, strong bipartisan vote, and so I've been a strong advocate. I believe it earned a spot on the floor. But there are so many things at play right now, and time being of the essence, it's likely that it'll be part of a package deal. I don't like that, but we probably at the very least would see an extension of the current law, and then there's a likelihood, if that happens, that we would begin to mark up a new Farm Bill in February. But at the very least, we're going to see an extension of the current law.
Okay, and you just mentioned that the House version is different from the Senate version. Can you explain why the House version is better for the farm families?
Well, particularly for Mid-South producers, what the Senate version was largely Midwestern, and that's kind of what we've seen over the last several farm bills. In fact, going back to 2 or 3 versions of farm bills that we've been living with, is that they're decidedly Midwestern, and that they don't really take into consideration, our crop insurance in the Mid-South, particularly East Arkansas, is irrigation.
Sure.
And so we don't have the kind of, crop insurance model. That it just doesn't work for us in the Mid-South. And so the House bill recognizes that and took that into consideration, and didn't apply this one-size-fits-all Midwestern crop insurance model.
Okay. Now, recently the EPA chose not to waive the renewable fuel standard requirement for the ethanol production. First of all, can you explain what the renewable fuel standard is, and how the EPA's decision will affect families in Arkansas?
Okay, the Renewable Fuel Standard, or the RFS, is basically a mandate, and in fact the Agriculture Committee has no authority over this. This comes out of the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, and they make the determination that 10% of the fuel that we put into our gas tank has to be ethanol. Mm-hmm. And so there's about 45% of the U.S. corn crop that goes into E10 blend of the fuel that we buy at the pumps. And so that's called the Renewable Fuel Standard, the RFS. What we were asking the EPA to do was to waive that, because right now corn prices were so high, and because of access to corn with the Midwestern part of the country under severe drought, it was putting a heck of a lot of pressure on our Arkansas poultry producers, but not just Arkansas producers of poultry. All across the country are feeling the crunch. In fact, 70% of the cost of producing a broiler is corn.
Right.
And so with corn being at record highs, the way we felt we could offset some of that pressure is to waive that RFS standard during a time of crisis like the drought,
Right.
or during a time of low stocks where it's hard to get corn. And they just didn't see it that way, and so they kept the RFS in place at the E10 requirement.
Sure. Now, as a co-chair of the Congressional Chicken Caucus, and also taking a role opposing the renewable fuel standard. Have you heard from any of the chicken farms?
Oh, absolutely. We continue to hear from our integrators across our district, across the state, and they're all saying the same thing. It's just killing them, and what we're going to see is the smaller integrators will probably be going out, and that's going to leave a few of the bigger ones that are able to withstand this. But my hope is that we can get the EPA to the table and apply a little more of a realistic approach. It's not that we're anti-ethanol, but when we see this requirement that is affecting the protein sector, and we know that 45% of our corn crop is going into the fuel chain as opposed to the feed and food chain,
right,
it does create a little bit of an imbalance and causes some real pressure on those prices for that our poultry producers are paying.
Now let's kind of take a little different focus here and focus really on Northeast Arkansas, and particularly Jonesboro. With Jonesboro being the largest city in the district, what do you see as a challenge or an opportunity in the future for Jonesboro?
Well, I think Jonesboro is really emerging and becoming real comfortable with the role of sort of the commerce hub, the healthcare hub, and sort of this regional hub of Northeast Arkansas. And I think that's a good thing. I think the leadership in place recognizes that, and in the broader sense, I think Northeast Arkansas has become comfortable with that. And so I think this move toward regionalization and a cooperation with the surrounding communities is not only good for Northeast Arkansas, it's good for all the communities involved. And so I think that what you're seeing now under the leadership of Mayor Perrin and the communities around Jonesboro is this recognition that we can do more for Northeast Arkansas if we're all working together and kind of a strength in numbers approach. That's good for the greater community of Northeast Arkansas. It's good for the entire district. It's good for the state of Arkansas. It's great in terms of attracting new industry. It's great for residential real estate development. It's great for our schools. And so rather than get into what may potentially be adversarial relationships with surrounding areas, I think what we're seeing now is sort of an embrace of this idea of regionalization, and that's good for economic development, and it's just great for the region.
Sure. Now, speaking of regionalization and kind of the future, you're aware that Jonesboro is really getting close to passing our comprehensive Vision 2030 plan. And that's going to reveal that there's a huge need for infrastructure in this area, with roads and highways, just in general, a huge need. In the past, we've had help with federal and state funding on the majority of these projects. With the current budget situation and potentially constraints that may be coming, do you think the funding will still be there?
No, I think what we're going to see is, we have finite resources. I think that certainly the federal government is still going to play a large role. It'll be a declining role over time. Certainly by the time 2030 rolls around, we'll see that role decline. And I think what you're going to see, and I think that you're seeing leadership in and around Northeast Arkansas recognize the fact that kind of got to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and start to invest more in ourselves.
Right.
And so when you see matching funds, that match will probably be a little bit higher than it was, going forward. And you see bonding issues that become a little more important, and you start to see regional cooperation with some of those bonding issues and so on. So I think you have to recognize that we've got a real fiscal crisis in Washington right now, and that we have our resources are diminished, and so if we certainly want to access those funds if and when they're available. But I think over time the realistic view is that probably going to play the federal government will play less of a role. And to some degree, that's probably a good thing, because now these regions can step up and sort of dictate their own agenda without necessarily having to dot every I and cross every T as a federal mandate, but more of a mandate of the community, of the region. And so you're going to start to see a lot more infrastructure investment here at home, and that's a good thing.
Good deal. Well, Congressman Crawford, thank you so much for sitting in with us. A wealth of information. I know it seemed like we were just tossing out topics left and right, but that's, again, I wanted to be a good tenant of your time. And
sure.
So again, thank you so much for sitting in with us.
Good to be here.